Welcome to this video where we're going to look at adding and subtracting fractions with the same denominator. Now I've put the same denominator there as a tool for you to see that that's the type of fractions we're dealing with, but I strongly suggest as you're teaching this that you don't focus on numerators and denominators. It can tend to confuse students in seeing fractions as a number. In the previous video, I mentioned that we should always have the whole represented for students so that they can see the whole and compare their fraction to it. We're going to look at adding quarters today, and obviously the same skills transfer across. So the students take a second whole and cut it up into 4 equal parts and label them quarters. They can then label that onto their number line to show where each one is. And they could write 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and a whole or 4/4. Now that takes us up to 1, but obviously our number system goes beyond that and students can extend it. So they can get a second whole, which would represent their 2, and we can label our quarters again onto that number line. Now, depending on the age of the students, how you get them to label that will depend on their age. So they could write this as 5/4, or they could write it as 1 and 1/4. And already they're getting that additive sense of their fractions. 1/4 plus 1/4 gives us 2/4. Using their previous number line that we constructed in the last video, they could have seen that that was equivalent to 1/2. So as they're adding these fractions, if we're asking them what is 1/4 plus 1/4, we want them to look at it on the number line, make it, and see that it is the same as 2/4. Now that notation is challenging because they're not necessarily seeing it as a number on the number line. So if your students are struggling with this, and even if they're not, I suggest that you start with problems in words. 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 2/4. You can differentiate for students by asking some students to represent it using numbers, or even some students seeing the equivalence of that being 1/2. We can get students to start counting in quarters using their number line. 1/4, and they jump, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, pause, that's equal to 1. Then we can go on to 5/4, 6/4, 7/4, 8/4. When they're familiar with that, you can start introducing 1/4, 1/2, and so on. So now if we ask them what is 3/4 plus 2/4, they'll be coming up with 5/4. They'll see it as an addition where it's a count of the quarters. And you can then start building in some of this numerical representation. And what we'll hopefully avoid is the misconception that we add the top and we add the bottom. Because when we use the language of numerators and denominators, what students are thinking is that they're two different kinds of numbers and they treat them differently. They don't see them as a number in themselves. I hope this has helped. I hope it helps scaffold and differentiate for your students so that we're not making it a system of rules whereby we're saying things like the denominators have got to be the same, so we just add the numerators. Let's build conceptual understanding. It will take time, but we'll be saving a lot of time in the long run because students will understand the rules of what they're doing. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please leave us a comment. I'd love to see examples of where you've used this in the classroom. So please feel free to post photos or send photos into learningu.com.au and check out our next videos on fractions where we start to look at, you guessed it, fractions with different denominators. Thank you.